News for your straight, objective news source. We clearly don't trust ABC, NBC, CBS, MSNBC, and all those guys. And we don't really trust Fox anymore. I think there was a time when we did. So we're glad to have One American News on the radar for most of us, at least. So our speaker tonight, we are proud to have Ryan Girdusky. He is a native New Yorker and a New York political correspondent for One American News Network. From 2015 to 2017, he was the senior writer for Red Alert Politics, a conservative news website for and by millennials. Before his work in the media, Ryan was a political consultant who worked on dozens of campaigns, including Michael Bloomberg for mayor of New York, Representative Bob Turner, and Representative Thomas Massie. We love Representative Thomas Massie. He was a speaker at the Empower Texans, I think it was Empower Texans, a year or so ago, so we really enjoyed him. He's going to talk about various different things and I think maybe take some questions, so we're very excited to hear from him. Please welcome Ryan.
Oh, perfect. Thank you guys so much for having me and inviting me from New York. I really appreciate it. It's my second time in Texas, so first time in the Dallas area. It's much different than when I went to Austin. A lot different. But thank you, Julie, too, for inviting me. I really appreciate it. So I'm the New York correspondent for One American News Network. I talk about mostly Northeast subject matters and New York-related subject matters whenever a politician comes there. A lot of de Blasio news, which I'm sure no one's interested in here. And I actually run a newsletter called the Nationalist Populist Newsletter. It's been about 3 weeks now. 1,000 people started signing up for it. So if you'd like to sign up for it, I'll just promote it. It's on my website, ryangirdusky.com. Just click newsletter and sign up for it. And I give out information worldwide about national populist candidates and issues that really matter to people of that political persuasion. I don't know. I pretty much consider myself, I guess, a national populist, and speaking one, and most of you probably have no idea who I am whatsoever. So I've been involved in politics since I was 18 years old. I worked for the New York City Council, the New York State Senate, then I worked for James O'Keefe. I worked for Andrew Breitbart a little bit. I filed the paperwork, I really did do as much. But I worked for him for a little bit. And then for congressional candidates and super PACs and Washington Examiner and Red Alert Politics and now One American News. And I talk a lot about national populism and the nation state and why it's important and why the issues that we care about are important. People who genuinely support Donald Trump, and I credit myself as saying I was a day one Trump supporter. Since the day that he announced, there was never a moment where I was a Ted Cruz supporter or Rubio or anything else. And I remember walking into my office. My coworker is a man named Bill Kristol. So I walked into my office the day that Trump announced, and I said, I think that this guy's going to be the nominee. And I was roundly laughed at. I worked for Conservative Inc., I worked for the Washington Examiner, a major conservative company. It was under Media DC, so it was the weekly standard in the Washington Examiner of Red Alert Politics. And I could say pretty healthily that with over 150 staffers, I was probably the only Trump supporter in the primary. And I was definitely the only vocal one. There were one or two other ones. They were sitting in the sidelines waiting to see what happened. That's generally the mentality of Washington, D.C. It is totally divorced from the rest of America. I come from Queens, New York. I'm from a blue-collar neighborhood of Queens, New York. Dad was a cop and a Marine. Mom, first person in her family to go to college. Everyone was in a union. Classic kind of American story. And I talk a lot about the people that I came from and the ideas that we would support. A lot of people are Democrats or independents, but they understand a certain mentality. I think that a lot of people that nationalist populism supports, and I think I say this, I think I open up with this because I think it's really important to understand why the nation is important, because a lot of people dismiss it and they say, you know, what would be the difference if we had a nation full of Canadians or Somalians or French or Chinese or whatever? Why are we really just a group of people, collective individuals who support the same idea, or are we American? Are we unique individual people that there's no one else like us in the rest of the world? I'm Roman Catholic, I don't know if anyone else here is, and Cardinal Sarah, who's a Nigerian cardinal from Africa, during the refugee crisis, he kind of gave this rebuke to Pope Francis. When Pope Francis was welcoming all the refugees, Cardinal Sarah said, "The ideology of liberal individualism promotes the mixing that is designed to erode the national borders of homelands and cultures, that lends itself to a post-natural and one-dimensional world where the only thing that matters is production and consumption." Part of our humanity is tied to the nation state. It is tied to our culture, and we are better off for it. As people from Colombia are better off for being Colombian, people who are from Belarus are better off being Belarus. It is tied to our humanity, tied to our culture. Without that, without those individual nationhood, without the individual culture, all we are units of production and consumption. All we are things to be used until we are no longer used. And I say this because there are real-world policies that are fueling national populism worldwide, and the things that I talk about, foreign policy and trade, and most importantly, immigration. And Julie sent me an email when I said I was going to talk, and I wasn't sure what I was going to talk about, and she said, "Why don't you talk about keeping Texas red?" It's an important issue. I'm sure you all are talking about it. Nationally, people are talking about it. And New York actually is a lot like Texas in one particular way. I'm sure that sounds weird, but New York is a victim of our own success. My family's been in New York since the early 1800s. We almost never left. And we were there for the ups and the downs. And in the 80s and in the 70s, New York was not a great place to live. It was crime-ridden. If you go watch the old movies of that time with Robert De Niro, that's really how it was. My dad was a cop in the early 90s in Harlem, one of the most dangerous places in the entire country. And we were very lucky because we had two very successful mayors, Rudy Giuliani and Mayor Bloomberg. And they were determined to make New York the safest big city in America, and we are the safest big city in America. But we were a very, very expensive city. And a lot of the people who had been there for generation and generation couldn't afford it anymore. A lot of kids that I grew up with didn't stay around. And they were replaced, by people who had never experienced New York when it was terrible, never understood the stories when it was terrible, never understood the amount of energy and work that went into making a place that she loved a place worth being. So they were replaced by a lot of yuppies, and a lot of hipsters, and a lot of foreigners, and a lot of first-generation immigrants, and they voted for policies and for politicians who didn't benefit the city as a whole, who now we are regressing as a city because they weren't there when it was terrible. And that's why we have a congressman named Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez in our city. That's why we have a mayor, Bill de Blasio in our city. We have these people who truly don't understand because they were voted in by people who just arrived there the day before. Texas, you guys are immensely successful, one of the freest states and very cost-efficient state. But because of that, you're having California move into your state. And people, the one thing I tell everybody, I tell politicians all the time, the one thing you cannot strip from a person is their culture. I will forever be a New Yorker, regardless of where I move to. I will always lock my car door. I will always do it. It's how I was raised, it's how I was brought up, it's what I understand. I will always eat pasta on Sundays. I'm Italian. It is just part of my nature. And people from California, and if anyone's from California, no disrespect, but they come with a certain belief system. And it's the same thing that Idaho is dealing with, the same thing Colorado is dealing with, the same thing Arizona is dealing with, is that the policies that liberals have presented in states like mine that have made it insufferable and impossible to live, they've left, but they brought that ideology with them. Or they brought more of a blue state ideology with them. Not necessarily liberal, but more different from what Texas is, different from what North Carolina is, or Florida is. So we talk about, I want to talk about a few things, a few ideas that I have, and I've worked on a lot of campaigns before, of how Texans could do a better job keeping Texas red. And I say this as someone who writes a lot about it. The first and foremost thing is the only way we're going to save this country and keep it a two-party system is if we reduce legal immigration. yes, we have to do something about illegal immigration, but we need to reduce legal immigration. We bring in 1.15 million people per year from all over the world. It is impossible to assimilate that time. When the last of my family came over in the 1920s, or the 1910s from Italy, from Sicily, they were all in the mafia. They were not the nicest people. It's not a joke. Yeah, they were not the people you would sort of want to be around. And I have a great uncle who's in his 90s, the last of that generation, still alive. His favorite thing on Thanksgiving is to talk about how he broke Tony Curtis's legs one time for owing money. And you don't know who that actor is, that is the family in which I came from, and that is the way a lot of Italians were. And in 1925, President Calvin Coolidge put a freeze on legal immigration, and we didn't have another wave until 1965. And over that 40-year period, Sicilians, Italian Americans, like my family, they started moving apart from each other a little bit. They started becoming Americanized. They found more loyalty to the nation than to the family. And we stopped protecting these people. We stopped protecting bad institutions that we had brought from the old world. And that is how, that's truly how, the 40-year freeze was how Italian Americans became the Republicans and became involved in America and broke away from the old world. We were very hard for people to assimilate. But all people can be assimilated, regardless of ethnic background or country of origin, but it takes time. It takes a lot of time sometimes. And at the rate we're going, it's never going to happen. We'll have a more balkanized nation. And we'll have a nation that's actually really, really bad at civic engagement. There's a book called Bowling Alone. Has anyone ever heard of it? Yeah, okay, like 2 people. Okay, great. It's a great book. It's very, very, very in-depth. It's from 10 years ago. But it talks about civic trust and civic engagement, and actually the negative side of mass immigration is to deplete civic trust. People not only do not trust people who look differently than them less, they trust people who look the same as them less. We can get that back, but it's going to take a lot of effort and a lot of time, and it can't happen under the current immigration system. There's a bill actually being voted on tomorrow. Everyone, I want to just do a little thought here. Everyone who feels like they are very involved in politics, please just raise your hand right now and just keep it raised for 1 second. You're obviously very involved in politics, so raise your hand. Yeah, okay. There's a bill called H.R. 1044. And it's the Fairness for High-Skilled Immigrants Act. If you've heard of it, keep your hand up. Oh, well, there are a few. Do you know Congresswoman Kay, what's her last name? Yes, she's a co-sponsor of it. She's the moneymaker. Did anyone know that? You did? Oh, okay, yeah, so there's 2, okay. So this bill basically it gives high-tech businesses, high-tech industries, an limitless amount of cheap labor from mostly India. And the main sponsor in the US Senate is Kamala Harris. And I interviewed a congressman from Tennessee who was co-sponsoring, and I said, aren't you a little worried about supporting a bill that President Trump's main Democratic opponents is sponsoring in the Senate, that you're giving her a huge legislative win on an election year? And he just gave me he was a very nice man. I can't remember his name right now, but he was a very, very nice man, and he just gave me a line that I knew was BS. I knew it was a lie. He just sat there and said, oh, well, President Trump's such a great president, he'll have no problem winning re-election. I was like, really? That's your answer? Like, you're going to give a Democrat a huge, huge victory. You're giving big tech, which is silencing conservatives everywhere across this country, a huge, huge money grab. And you are weakening college graduates in America who want to work in IT and want to work in tech. You're actually giving them more competition with cheap labor. So doesn't that concern you? And he didn't get it. I sat there and I realized I was talking to a brick wall. And after the interview ended, his chief of staff walked up to me and goes, what bill is that? I don't think we're actually supporting that bill. So I thought I was insane. So I look it up online, and sure enough, he's supporting it. And she goes, I don't know what that bill is. And I was like, how do you not know what that bill is? So I spoke to one of my friends at one of the groups, and he goes, well, Ryan, there's over 100 lobbyists in Washington right now fighting for this bill every single day. And with the exception of my interview in the media, I don't know, and I'm not shaming anyone else in the media, but I don't know anyone else who's even talking about it. But the vote's tomorrow, so go and call your congresswoman and ask her not to support it. It'd be worth it, because that's your last chance to. But Texas laws and problems. Oh, okay. So without a clause of legal immigration, I don't think there's any other way to do it. First and foremost, and that's from Washington. And if anyone follows me on social media, I'm a very big critic. I was a day one Trump supporter, but I'm a big Trump critic because I expect politicians to keep their promises. And President Trump could end this border crisis tomorrow if he wanted to. He absolutely has all legal authority to. He could reduce immigration tomorrow without Congress. He could do most of the things on immigration without Congress. It's very important for people to understand that and to hold his feet to the fire with that. But aside from that, what else could this group be doing? What else could everyone be doing? So there's a website called 538, and there was a man named David Wasserman who used to write for that. He was a really, really, really smart political analysis. The most loyal people to the Republican Party are non-college educated white workers, white working class. That's the most loyal supporters of Republicans nationwide. Overall, about 80% support Republicans. There are in Texas, as of 2014, which is the last number I could get last night, 1.4 million non-college educated, working white class people who are not registered to vote. There's 1.4 million. I bet you if you go through your neighborhood and you have a Rolodex and you look at who's, not Rolodex, but you know, an app. I was raised by my grandparents. I have a section of weird lines. But if you look at who's registered in your block, you probably have someone on your block not registered to vote. There is a group called Engage Texas that just started. They have a $15 million fund to actually find voters to register. And multiple generation. Mexican Americans are very Republican in Texas, and there are actually minorities who are college graduate tend to be more Republican than other minorities. But the biggest jump, the biggest pool is this 1 million plus non-college educated white working group of people in the state who are not registered to vote. So if you're going to look for new voters, that's your $100 ticket on the floor. And everything after that is just, you know, extra after that. But I would also be looking at engaging with black fraternity groups and black colleges who are, you know, black young men vote on average. Black men under 30, I think the last one, the CNN exit poll, was about 20 to 25% vote Republican. They voted for Romney, I think, at 20%. I think they voted for Trump at 25%. But you have that, and you have, and then the other thing, the most important thing, I think, ultimately, what it comes down to is we need to start making it a priority to promote big families and promote childhood and promote having children. I'm not one to speak by name. I'm single. I have no children. But in the Northeast, you are seeing something radically change in very small areas in states like Pennsylvania and Ohio. And this is a story that not a lot of people cover in the media. I've written a bit about it. So you probably have no Amish in this state, right? No, okay. But you know what Amish is, right? Okay. The year that I was born, what? There's a few, okay. But the year that I was born, in 1987, there were 100,000 Amish in America. Today, 30 years later, there are 350,000 Amish in America. At the rate of current growth, there's expected to be 250 million Amish by the year 2200. Now, obviously, we all can't be Amish, but religious families who have more children and are more engaged will ultimately be the thing that saves us long term. Everyone has their own personal life story, everyone has their own personal religious background, but if anyone here sits there and they are an employer and they could promote benefits and promote a business model that works for their business but also allows their employees to be more involved with their families and to be able to support a larger family, that's something that they could do. On an individual level, one by one. If anyone is a grandparent and their child wants to have an extra child and you know that you have the money to sit there and help them support having another kid, things like that, ultimately that will be long term. Because at the rate we're currently going in, and this drives, there's a guy named Eric Kaufman who's a big demographics person who's really intelligent, and he goes on all these NPR shows, and I'm friends with him, and these NPR hosts literally lose their mind at the thought that religious people are having more children than non-religious people. It is horrifying to them, but it is the truth, and it is the long-term outlook. we have to do those three things, I think, more than anything. We have to engage people who are not registered to vote, who should be registered to vote and could be Republican. We have to ultimately reduce legal immigration, which is something bigger than anyone in this individual room can do, but President Trump surely could do it by himself. If he just stopped talking to his son-in-law, the third thing was ultimately we have to support having larger families and support larger families. I think that that's really, really, really important. So I'm sure it wasn't what you guys expected. I will take any question about any subject matter as well on anything, but that was what. Sure, go ahead.
What was that HR thing that was?
HR 1044, which is the Fairness for High-Skilled Workers Act, and the bill ultimately, this is what it does. So there are something called country caps. I don't know if anyone knows what that is, but every country, if they want to apply for a work visa, only 7% of work visas are allowed by any individual country. So there are, I forget the exact number, let's say it's 100,000. There's 100,000 work visas. So only 7,000 can go to India, only 7,000 can go to France, only 7,000 can go to Luxembourg or Angola or wherever for work visas, but specifically H-1B, which are high-tech visas. Now, any country that does not use those country caps, they get recycled and then they go back to another country. So India takes about 25%, only because other countries can never actually fill those visas. And what's good about it is, in the current system, is we get a lot of high-skilled immigrants from places like Iran, Israel, Australia, Germany. They'll take the most highly skilled H-1B visas, and then a lot of lower-skilled, high-tech, or low-tech, but high-tech industry, IT workers will come from India, and they'll do basically the lowest of the low jobs. And when they come here, their visa is attached to their employer. So it's a little almost, I don't want to say slave labor because that's not technically true, but it is a way that they can never leave their job. Because their residency in this country is determined by their job. As long as they hold their job, they can be residents. And the minute they can't, they'll be off to their whatever country they came from. What this bill does is eliminates the country caps. So we take in, let's say, 100,000 H-1B. They can all come from India. So what that does is, one, it actually prevents the really high-skilled worker from maybe Germany or, you know, wherever, Russia, from coming in who has a real actual niche that no American has. And the second thing that it does is it gives an enormous incentive to big tech in America. So what they could do is they could just sponsor all their employees for green cards, give them on the path to citizenship, get rid of them, and just get another Indian low-tech visa worker as fast as possible. So it runs the mill for them. So it's a huge boom to the low-tech, to the big tech industry. It really screws over American workers. And there are over 100 lobbyists in Washington, D.C. right now working on it. They've been working on it for years. Kevin Yoder was the big sponsor of it back in 2017. He was trying to get it passed out of committee. Jeff Sessions called him on the Senate floor, on the House floor, and said, please don't do this. I know a lot of people don't like Jeff Sessions, but there was no one better in immigration in the United States Senate or as AG than Jeff Sessions was. Jeff Sessions called him on the House floor and said, please don't do this. He did it anyway, and God bless him, Chuck Grassley refused to let it come up to a vote in the committee in the Senate, so it killed in the committee. This year, the committee is chaired by Lindsey Graham, and Lindsey Graham, I mean, for sale. Just, there's no other way to say it. If he was a NASCAR, he'd be covered in and he doesn't care about American workers whatsoever. So that's the problem right now, and it's luckily being held up in the Senate. And another shame, one of the biggest supporters of it in the Senate is Mike Lee. But it's being held in the Senate, luckily, because of Rand Paul, and Rand Paul is trying to include nurses in the H-1B visa category, which is not currently included in, and he's not letting it come for a vote unless they include nurses, and no industry wants to include nurses, so that's why it's not moving. But it has 108 Republican House sponsors right now, and actually I'm still friends with Thomas Massie, and he's one of the sponsors, and I called him today, screaming at him like a lunatic. I go, what is wrong with you? I don't know why he takes my calls, but I'm but he's a really great guy. But I go, like, what happened? But there are 108 really, really big lobbyists, and the big tech companies have been working endlessly to get this thing through because they know it's going to be cheap labor for them. And sadly, with Trump's victory, I always equated Trump's victory to this. Imagine, you know, a Hasidic Jew or Orthodox Jew going to temple every single Saturday, and then on his way to temple one Saturday, very observant, he sees Jesus Christ rise from the dead. And he has to either come to terms with A, everything he believed in his whole life was a lie, or B, just double down on what he believes in. That was the Republican Congress when Donald Trump was elected. They either had to come to terms with everything they believed was a lie, or they had to double down in their disbelief, and their belief in things that are wrong. And sadly, almost all of them just doubled down and beliefs in things that were wrong, and they just don't understand the immense strain on the average American family and the average American worker by the policies that they push. I mean, a lot of them sit there and they wrap themselves in the flag and the veterans and the troops, and you know, if Nancy Pelosi honestly sat it out for a year and we didn't have the fear of Nancy Pelosi being Speaker or Kamala Harris being President, I don't think anyone would vote for the Republican Party most of the time. And most of these candidates, with the exception of very few. You know, Ron DeSantis is very good, Josh Hawley is great. Oh, you guys have Chip Roy down here, who's fantastic. He's so good. If you guys are involved in campaigns, Chip Roy's excellent. But you also have Dan Crenshaw, who's horrible. He's terrible. I'm just telling it like it is. He's good on television, but on policy, he's one of the worst people in Congress. Go ahead, sorry, yeah.
I put up several posts this weekend with some screenshots of you guys doing the parade and so forth. A lot of people ask, where else are you? You know, you're on Uverse on my feed.
What American News you're talking about?
Yeah, what other, you know, cables, and where is your funding? Where do you get your money?
Well, I get a check in the mail every week. I don't know where our company gets its money from. I know we're privately owned by a family. I think we make profit because we are on DirecTV. We're on certain apps. I'm not sure which ones. I'm doing a terrible job at things. And then we're on Fios. So it's big on the East Coast. I know. I'm not sure if it's very big in Texas. We do have DirecTV, and we're slowly growing in more and more households around the entire country. But I'm not exactly sure. I know they're trying to get on Comcast and several other big networks, but until then, that's where we can found.
I tell you, you just had a former Speaker of the House in Texas that was a Democrat. He watches you.
Oh, that's great to know.
Not anybody else.
Oh, that's great to know. There's a guy over in the back. Yeah.
Yeah, a question on India. Talk about India.
Okay.
So since India was liberated in the 40s, they had a right-wing government for pretty much this entire time. They're just dominant. Even though they've got multiple communist parties in their legislature who hold seats, yet the right wing is persistent.
Right.
Very strong.
Modi.
Indians come to America, they vote left-wing, almost 80%. Why do you think that is? What are your thoughts?
Well, yeah, okay, so that's a great question. Modi right now is Prime Minister of India, and he's one of the most right-wing leaders. I write about him every week for my newsletter. He's one of the most right-wing leaders around the entire world. He's a nationalist populist of his own country. He's actually campaigned and successfully campaigned on stripping citizenship from 4 million Bangladeshis, and he won. So Bolsonaro campaigned on knocking down the rainforest, and he won. So you never know. You never know. But the issues are much different. And I think that part of it is that, one, when you come to America as an immigrant, and I'm not an immigrant, but when many immigrants come to America, they are immediately told, if you are not Christian and you are not white, you do not belong to the Republican Party. And then the second thing is that second thing is the victimhood culture. There's something really interesting going on right now with Kamala Harris and many other Democrats, where they are getting rid of the term black or African American, and they are exchanging with people of color. And I don't know if you guys have ever noticed this, but pay attention to the language of it. Because black Americans have a history in this country that is unique, that is different, that is part enshrined with our national history. They've contributed to all our major wars, to the creation of jazz and rock and roll, and they are uniquely American, as anyone here is uniquely American. But their story and their journey in this country is not the journey of an Indian or someone who's Hispanic or someone who's Asian, and they've created this term called person of color, basically to wrap all non-white people in one category of equal suffering or equal discrimination. And no, you don't get. Kamala Harris's family her father is a wealthy Jamaican. Her mother is Indian. She went to high school in Quebec. She does not, she uses, that if you watch the Democratic debate, she's talking about busing, because that is basically the only little shred of the black experience in this country that she has any connection to whatsoever. She's not the descendants of slaves, and in fact, I believe, and I might be wrong, but I believe her ancestors actually were slave traders.
Yes.
So, I might be wrong, but I believe that she has no lineage to it. Michelle Obama does, Oprah Winfrey does, and it's so funny because they talk about, they're having a national conversation on reparations, but Kamala Harris wouldn't get reparations. She did not experience slavery in this country. She did not experience Jim Crow in this country. There is legitimate conversations to be had about those experiences, but you can't come to this country in 1957 and then sit there, or 2017 or 2019 and say, well, I'm here for this and I belong to this. But a lot of minority groups are. They're sitting there using the word to term persons of color to have equal discrimination to the black experience, which is completely preposterous, it's totally unfair, and if, you know, Jesse Jackson or Al Sharpton had like an ounce of actual like sanity to them, they'd sit there and say, no, you're not on this boat, you're not on this bus, you're not jumping on our experience at all right now because it's unique and it's different. But I think that those are the two main things, and I think the third thing is that when it comes to foreigners, like people from India, as you said, who vote for right-wing governments, I think that one, if you do know any like really woke Indians, they are the most woke people you've ever met before in your life. They are on another level. But the ones who aren't, I think they sit there and they adopt, I think they adopt the language of the left, which is to sit there and say that they're being discriminated against. They've adopted those discriminatory things, even if they're not true. And I think a lot of it also comes to the fact that a lot of them are not Christian, and they move to big blue states, and they move to big blue cities. There's a reason, I think, why Mexican Americans who are multi-generation in Texas vote Republican more often than multi-generation Mexicans who vote Democrat in California, even if it's only like 10%, I think that's what the number is. But I think that's because you just know more Republicans. You have to go to your local city councilman to ask for a tree to be cut down or something like, or the road to be fixed or whatnot, and you speak to them more often. You're more open to voting for them. So I think those are the three main components to it. But that's just my opinion. Sorry, Richard.
Tell people what Trump could do tomorrow to stop the war.
Oh yeah, this is great. Hold on a second. Get ready for this one. So, all right. I think this section is 1182F or C1182, 8C1182F. That's the president. It's a law passed by Congress that was confirmed by the Supreme Court in Trump v. Hawaii, and it states that the President of the United States can stop any alien or class of aliens to come in the United States if he deems it bad for the country. It is a very broad clause. That is why we had the ban for, the travel ban. It's not a Muslim ban, it was a travel ban. That is how you use the travel ban. The President of the United States, and I've said this to people in the White House, and I've said this to people, and I know people in the White House have said this to the biggest obstacle President Trump has to a lot of things he wants is the White House lawyers. The White House lawyers are not his friends. The White House lawyers tell him constantly he can't do anything, he can do everything. But what he could do is he could deem the triangle countries and any countries that he wants as inadmissible. And therefore, when they reach the border, even under asylum cases, when they reach the border, they would be told, you are not allowed to enter the country, you have to turn around. And that would end the crisis tomorrow. Bill Clinton did that with Haiti in the 90s. Other presidents have done it dozens of times throughout our history. It is completely viable. It could totally happen. I don't know why he isn't doing it. I know that the White House lawyers tell him constantly he can't do it, but I know for 100% that he can. And that would end the crisis in one day. We don't need a Congress, we don't need a budget, we don't need a wall, we need nothing, we just need the president to not speak to Jared Kushner or White House lawyers. Yes, sir.
Well, I only had one thing to mention, but now I've got two.
Okay.
So let's cover number two first.
Okay.
I think that Trump is committed to stopping the immigration problem on the southern border.
Okay.
But he's also trying to get political mileage. So if he did an executive order right now and did what you said, he could be looked at the boogeyman. He's trying to change the narrative. This is what he's trying to do, is change the narrative that it looks like the Democrats are the bad people in the story. So I don't think he's going to do what you suggest because he can't control the narrative that way.
Okay.
So that's the short response that I had to that.
Okay.
The point that I wanted to talk about, I'm an immigrant.
Okay.
I came here 40 years ago. I seem like a minority because I did it legally.
You are a minority.
But here's the problem I have that I don't understand, and I cannot get a decent explanation about the southern border. I have always understood, and I've travelled quite extensively, I think I'm up at about 42 countries now, and wherever I go and whoever I talk to, I understand that asylum is for people that are persecuted, their lives, whatever, are in danger, and they have to leave that country to sustain life. But I've always understood that when they go for asylum, they're getting away from danger, and asylum is the first safe country they arrive at.
Right. Well, so I'll explain it. So one, it's called, I think it's called the Third Country Act, the Safe Country Act. We have it with certain countries. We have it with Canada. We do not have it with Mexico. So that's why we don't have that. Actually, Trump tried to negotiate. We had a negotiation with Mexico. We tried to include that in a deal. Mexico said no, and they would not include that because they don't want this problem on their hands permanently. And that's why the asylum laws have not been changed. In Europe, the EU laws is that it's the first country you enter. But in America, it's country by country who we have to deal with. We have that with Canada. We do not have that with Mexico. With the other thing, as far as political capital goes, to show the Democrats are the bad guys, okay, in the meantime, we have 100,000 per month. That's 1 million per year. How long are we going to wait until 2020? And then we won't have, and then Arizona will be a blue state, Texas will be a blue state, Georgia will be a blue state. At what point is the country more important than political capital? I'm sorry, I don't believe that. I don't take that as a win. Trump could do 1 million things to win over political capital. He could stop tweeting that people are losers, for example, and that might help with women. I mean, and I like those tweets, but I know I'm in the minority who do it. He could get his Ivanka's maternity leave bill started. He could do the infrastructure bill. There's 1 million things that he could do to sit there and show how great of a guy he is. But he did prison reform, and no one in the mainstream media covered it. And I think that had Kim Kardashian not been there, no one would have covered it. They did not give him 1 inch when he did anything the Democrats like. Never. John Stewart was at his 9/11 testimony said that President Trump's administration deals with 9/11 victims the best of any former administration, George W. Bush and Barack Obama. Trump's administration does it the best. No one covered it. No one talked about it. In the meantime, we have cases of Ebola coming to the border. We have gangs coming to the border. We have a myriad of diseases coming to the border. We have economic migrants and economic refugees coming to the border. And they're all being released. I mean, I don't tell you guys, you're in Texas. They are all being released. We still have catch and release. That still has not ended. And it's not just the migrant crisis that Trump, I give Trump credit where credit is due. He's done great on judges. He's done great on the economy. He's done very good on trade deals. But he had 3 big campaign things that differentiated him from Jeb Bush. And it was immigration, foreign policy, and trade. Okay, he's done very good on trade. On foreign policy, he has that crazy walrus running around the White House saying, "Bomb Iran," and then that's John Bolton. And then on immigration, things wouldn't, and I'm not joking when I say this, things would be better under President Hillary Clinton right now. They're the worst they have ever been since the 90s. And he's let it all go. And I know, I have a lot of connections in the White House, a lot of contacts in the White House. I know he cares about it. I know he sits there and asks the right question. I know when he watches Fox News and watches Chris Kobach on Fox News, he sits there and yells at Stephen Miller and says, why aren't I doing this? The problem is one, he hired DHS. I mean, he hired Democrats. He hired General Kelly, who was a Democrat who hated him, and now he has Acting Secretary Kevin McAleenan, who actually auditioned to be Hillary's DHS secretary. And now he's running the immigration thing. He's leaking to the Washington Post when we're doing ICE raids. And he didn't get fired yet. So I'm sorry, yes, there are things that you could be doing for political capital, but at some point, it's been 3 years into the administration. I'm not going to wait anymore. I'm not going to give you, sit there and say, well, you know, you're better than Hillary, or thank God for Gorsuch, or whatever. No, you're failing. President Trump is failing on immigration. There's no other way to sit there and say it can end it tomorrow. I'm just here to tell people how we can end it tomorrow. But, sorry, guy in the green, because there's more questions. Yeah?
When the Tea Party was founded a little over a decade ago, I'm curious, we talked a lot with during Obama's years about the national debt and fiscal issues. Fiscal issues is one of the founding principles of the party. And I don't see that being talked about anymore, and I just saw we hit a record 22 trillion in debt. I'm worried that the warning signs are flashing for recession and very few people are paying attention to what's going on economically behind the scenes. And I'm worried we could end up with a full-blown currency crisis. And I'm just, how do we prioritize these issues when there's such a big border issue, such a big fiscal? How do we address these things?
Right, I think the problem with economic issues like the debt is it's not a sexy issue. It's not, I mean, on One American News we have a debt clock literally every day, and we show this is the debt, and it's not like it's imaginary, it's not like we're not talking about it. But I think that for Congress, I had on once again, Congressman Fleischerman, that's from Tennessee, couldn't have been a nicer person. But the Tea Party Congress really had one major victory, which was the caps on spending. And he, literally there was a technical term that I just blanked out of my head, but sequestration. And he was talking about it as if it was the worst thing Congress ever did. And I'm like, really? Like, you're the Republican and you're talking how terrible it is that you can't spend more money. I think that until we sit there and we have a rational conversation as far as national debt goes, until we have a rational conversation of what we would be willing to cut, because you're not going to cut Medicaid, you're not going to cut Medicare, you're not going to cut Social Security. It's just not going to happen. It's politically, it's a game over. I mean, Paul Ryan tried to run it for I don't know how many years, and it never got anywhere. I think that until we actually have a normal conversation, and one, what does our immigration system cost us? How many legal and illegal immigrants are on our social services? How much does that cost to our welfare system? How much does that cost to our hospitals and overcrowding schools and the damage to the roads over time? We need to have a conversation on that. We need to have a conversation on what we spend on our military. Do we still need to be in Italy 75 years after World War II ended? Do we really need to sit there and still be in both Poland and Germany? The average European is over 45 years old. They are not fighting each other with canes and walkers. They all belong to the EU. They all belong to NATO. We have bases in almost every one of these countries. Do we need to be having these ongoing missions all around the world? That's a huge portion of our cost as a federal government. And then where else could we be cutting? Yeah, it's a huge concern. It's a national security issue. It's an issue on everything. Should we raise the age of Social Security retirement? How do we make Medicare and Medicaid more cost effective? We're not going to repeal it, but how do we make it more cost effective? And especially considering healthcare is the main issue among independents and Democrats in polling, is there a way to do that? Is there a way to sit there and do a system like Canada's where they buy pills in bulk, so we reduce prices and we'll drop the cost of Medicaid and Medicare? I don't know all these answers. I'm definitely not a healthcare expert. I barely know what my insurance is, so don't ask me. But those conversations need to be happening. But until we have an answer to what we want to be cut, you can't go to Washington and say cut something, because they don't know either. And you have to have a very direct thing, I think, if you want to address the debt and say, this is what we need to be cut. And I think that, if we want to have a serious conversation, I think we need to look at some of our holy grails. I think we need to look at some military spending that we have. It's really, really overwhelming. The Pentagon had one audit to do. They had one audit and they failed at the audit. And I don't think they ever try to do it again. And I think we also need to audit the Federal Reserve too. But those conversations have disappeared. So, but until we have an exact list of things that we want to be cut and want to be seen cut, and we don't lose our minds when they say, oh, well, let's cut, one of our bases overseas, I don't know if we'll have it. But also, that's my opinion about that. So, go ahead.
What's your educational background, and did your politics change, or if you were a populist or conservative in college, if you went to college, did you get marginalized?
I went to college to be an art student, so I was really trying to fail at life, and that's a true story. I went to Paris to go study Salvador Dali, and when I got there, I noticed that most of his major works weren't there, and I said, where's the melting clocks, where's this, where's that? And they said it's actually at the biggest Dali museums in St. Petersburg, Florida. And I remember saying, Paris. And I could have gone to St. Petersburg, Florida. Anyway, so I said art. I was a liberal. I wasn't a liberal. I had two major beliefs that I knew. I knew I was against the Iraq War, and I knew I was against amnesty for illegal aliens. And those are the only two worldviews that I actually had. And I didn't have a worldview on abortion or tariffs or whatever. I had a worldview on those two issues. And I remember in 2008, I said, I vote for anybody who's good on those two issues, and it was Ron Paul. So I went to a Ron Paul meetup group, and thank you, one person. But he was your congressman. It's better than Dan Crenshaw. And I really don't like Dan Crenshaw. And I went to a Ron Paul meetup group, and we started talking about the Constitution. It was a conversation I never had in high school. I didn't really go to college, and I don't think I would have had those conversations even if I did go to college. And that's kind of how the evolution of my beliefs when I voted for Ron Paul. And then I voted for Ron Paul again in 2012, and then I did not vote for Mitt Romney because I hated Paul Ryan since I was like 18. I was always right about Paul Ryan, how terrible he was. I did for the Constitution Party in 2012. It's like one of 9 New Yorkers who did it. And then in 16 I was voting for Trump because I thought that he was right on those issues, and I still think, you know, because I'm from Queens, New York. I mean, it's one of the most diverse counties in America, and I saw. And not to speak ill of any culture or any people, but I saw very nice neighborhoods that were historically German and Italian and had been for generations, literally change over the course of 5 years. And not that any people are bad, but it's just, it was something that I did not sit there and say, this is a neighborhood I want to live in. Not that I lived there, but neighbors I wouldn't want to go to, where the immigrants, where they would hang dead animals outside their windows. And they were coming from third world countries, and they were bringing third world philosophies with them. It's not wrong, I'm not shaming them, this is what they know. It's just not what I want to live in. I don't want to live in Calcutta or in Mexico City, I want to live in America. So it definitely informed my beliefs, but I'm a very big supporter of zoning laws. I'm not straight down the line conservative, I guess. I love zoning laws. I think they should be enacted everywhere. Stuff like that. So yeah, so that's basically where I come from politically, and it was a slow evolution. I think I was a libertarian for about 5 minutes, and then I just moved over. I got out of that group. After I saw the man dancing naked at the party convention, I was like, oh my God, I did not come onto this group. Sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
I'd like to kind of give you a pass on American Youth. I'm fortunate enough to be able to watch it on a regular basis. One thing that I think is great, the educational aspect that you have. I think more of that, people don't understand the Constitution and the history of the country.
Yeah.
Which is done in between.
Those history segments, yeah.
In between your programs, and also.
I do some of those voiceovers. I have a whole different TV voice. It's much more pleasant voices.
And the other is you are putting out the amount it's costing us, I presume, coming from the southern border.
Right, the cost of legal immigration.
The amount of the people coming in, the cost to us, and we're into the billions, and that needs to be put out. People don't realize that's coming out of our pocket.
Right.
And it's not going into the people we need. And I think one of the biggest things that we have to deal with is the homelessness. How do we deal with the homelessness?
Well, I'm actually doing a segment in 2 weeks, I believe, as long as it gets okay for my bosses, but I'm doing a segment where I become friends with park rangers in New York City. New York City has, I think, 75,000 homeless people now. It's astronomical. I think between New York and Los Angeles, it'd be one of the biggest cities in America, our homeless population alone. And I asked this park ranger friend of mine, I said, if you could tell me where, what's the homeless like? Usually, we've always been told a third of the homeless are mentally ill, a third are drug addicts, and a third are just working poor who can't afford a home. And so they become homeless. There was a law in New York State which subsidized and helped working poor stay in their homes. That law expired, and that's why a lot of people came into homelessness. But he said to me, actually, you'll never believe how many homeless people are not from this country. He said it is absolutely astounding. So I'm supposed to go on a ride with the park rangers to actually, when they have to break up these homeless tenements and homeless, not tenements, but homeless encampments, and see, he's like, we have to speak multiple languages to them because they're not, a lot of them are not from this country. So yeah, but I totally agree, homelessness is a huge crisis that no one in the Democratic debates is talking about for some reason. But any other question? Oh, sorry, we'll wrap it up. Oh, okay, I know you did. One more question, anybody? Or no? Okay, I'll let it early then. I'll stick around there to say hello to everybody, but thank you all for having me. I really appreciate it. newsletter. It's at RyanGirdusky.com under the newsletter and just sign up. So thank you.
Right, thank you so much. Okay, you guys are excited.